big tune in the background. Good evening. Just a quick catch up. I haven't had a chance. We've been on the road again. A quick update with the IAMSOLDIERX campaign. I've just been to meet a few more squaddies. Finding out more stories. There needs to be an actual investigation. The general public really need to know the condition of our army. The morale level, the conditions they're living in. For example, even the food, just everything. It all plays into this IAMSOLDIERX campaign. I've met, there's 40 men sharing on their, how would you say it, on their wings. It's like a prison. But there's one working toilet. One working toilet for 40 squaddies. What? It's Britain, it's 2018. We're one of the richest countries in the world. What's the reason for that? The drinking water, the bath water. You've got to see the colour of it. And I've got all pictures and images of this. The food. Food that I simply would not serve to a dog. I've seen the pictures and the images of the food. Now, they say an army marches on its stomach. Not the British Army. They don't, because they're all buying takeaways, because it's cheaper. So, campaign about... Why does it keep going in and out? It keeps buffering in and out, doesn't it? Cutting off. What started off as a campaign about one young man losing his job. It's just developing and developing, because I've travelled this country now for the last week, meeting, serving soldiers at different barracks across this country. And there's so much wrong. We've got lads now in South Sudan. I've spoke to them last night. They're being fed rations. Rations. They're not at war in South Sudan. They're not at war. I believe they have a bill of... They're not at war. They're on a humanitarian mission. And they're being fed rations. Why? All comes down to money. They're having to pay for that. All the British Army lads are paying for their own food. So that surprised me in itself. Does it not surprise you? Us taxpayers, where do you want your money to go? I want it to go to feeding and giving the best possible living conditions as well for our armed forces. This is a fact. When I show you the images, when I'm going to put them into videos, when you see the images and the conditions that some of our armed forces are living in Britain, and the food, you would not put refugees in those camps. There would be outcry if refugees' food and water and conditions were the conditions that our armed forces are living in Britain. There'd be outcry. If you haven't signed the petition yet, we're at 190,000 people now. I will be handing that in. I face court next week. I face court at the Old Bailey on the 23rd. Don't ask me why I'm at the Old Bailey. The Old Bailey, the most serious court in our land. I'm before the head judge of Britain, the top #1 judge in the country. And this is where it's very surprising for me. I don't have a prosecutor. The judge is acting as the prosecutor and the judge. And I'm not allowed a jury. The judge has actually added 2 further charges. It was the judge that added the charges, not a prosecutor. So the judge, who I believe you'd presume, I'd have presumed the judge has to be independent so he can judge. Well, this judge is prosecuting and judging. So, am I hopeful? No, I'm not. Do I generally believe with this latest IAMSOLDIERX campaign, these are issues that certainly the establishment would not want being aired. The conditions and the morale of our armed forces. All of us sit at home comfortably, I do, thinking we've got the best army in the world and the men are fighting fit and ready to go. And as I've spent the last week, it's a worrying situation. Because the conditions they're living in, the food they're being fed, and their morale It's all shit. And there's a reason for that. Because of the funding, because of the support they're receiving. I haven't even touched on PTSD yet. I haven't even touched on it. But the same messages I'm getting it's the same all across this country. I've travelled, I've spent the last week going, Kev's done some driving. I know I always moan at Kev because I say he's not a good driver, but he's done some driving. We're sitting now, we've probably got another 4-hour drive to get back home. Just met another load of lads here, just to find out what their views are on the IAMSOLDIERX campaign. And most of you will be like me, or I just thought our armed forces would have had everything they needed, would have had all the support they need. Not at all. They're being treated like shit. The living conditions, the food, the support, everything. It's absolute, but anyway, I'll make more of that. I'll be releasing a few videos over the next couple of days that will just show us interviewing some of these men who distort their voices, cover their faces. And yeah, as I said, I'm in court on Tuesday at the Old Bailey, and if they weren't, I think there'll be a few people in the establishment who are pretty frustrated with me. So, just for the record, I would never kill myself. I don't know, what was his name? Dr. Kelly, was it, who ended up getting murdered? I would never, ever commit suicide. I would not have a drugs overdose because I'm not on drugs. Just clearing a few things up, because I reckon if I hadn't already rattled the cage of the establishment, then this little, what I'd say is a rebellion within the armed forces against the hierarchy, against the taking away of their own freedoms, this is certainly going to upset people up there, people at the top. So every single person I'm speaking to as well, they all want to leave. They're all leaving. They're all leaving, all trying to leave, all want to leave. They're saying, I said, well, if we went to war with Russia next week, what would happen? Half of them saying we wouldn't fight. Look who we're fighting for. That is the feeling, or the mood. It's not good. So, it's, we'll see what happens on my court case. We'll see what happens with IAMSOLDIERX. We're yet to hear that he's... Well, Sky News, this is another one. Sky News, we all saw their fake reporting on me. Now, when this IAMSOLDIERX campaign started, the next day, like the government would push their agenda, straight away Sky News came out and said he had a long history of disciplinary problems. This 17-year-old kid, like, he can have a long history. He's 17. How long could he have been in the army, yeah? But he has a long history of disciplinary problems. I've interviewed someone who works with him. I'll distort their voice. He's got no long history. Sky News have lied from a source in the army. Sky News are playing the machine of the government, like they were with me the other week, which we've all seen them exposed for, like they were today, even with Aaron Banks. It's just what they are. They're there to just distort the truth and to play an agenda and play a certain narrative. So the narrative they wanted was that this boy was kicked down for a long history of disciplinary. Imagine that. Not only is he willing to serve our country and risk his life and give his life to our country, but then they try and destroy him personally and his reputation by saying he has a long history of disciplinary problems, which he doesn't. Factually incorrect. A lie. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to be going away in the morning. That's why I've just been non-stop to get this campaign up and going so this boy ain't left on his own, and I'm going to be going away in the morning with my wife and kids for a few days prior to court on the 23rd. Any of you that can be there on the 23rd, we have a stage, a PA system. We have a list of speakers that are going to be talking. We have from Richard Inman from Veterans Against Terrorism, Janice Atkinson. Then she was wonderful and she was brilliant whilst I was in prison. She's at MEP. Myself, Kevin Carroll. Who am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? There's a list. Anyway, Ezra. So if you can join us at court, I know there'll be a demonstration outside all day, and it will go on till after court, till hopefully if I walk out the doors or if I don't walk out the doors. Either way, there'll be speeches happening. And That's the other thing I want to talk about. The case that I was reporting on, which is why I was put in prison, it had reporting restrictions. Well, tomorrow, journalists now, finally now, okay, and this is when you see why, they've gone and challenged yesterday at Leeds Crown Court, they've challenged the reporting restrictions. They hadn't challenged them at all. They challenged them yesterday. There's a judgment coming tomorrow at 2 o'clock where we will find out if the reporting restrictions will be lifted. And I'll tell you now, 100% they will be lifted. Do you know why they'll be lifted? Because they can't try me and send me to prison next week unless they lift the reporting restrictions. Because everything I'll talk about in the trial will be to do with that previous trial. So now, when it suits them, the mainstream media and the government will allow these reporting restrictions to be lifted, which shouldn't have been there anyway, in my view. The whole world needs to hear about these trials and cases. So, yeah, it will be lifted tomorrow, and then there's lots that I'll be able to speak about tomorrow once they're lifted, which unfortunately I legally can't now. So anyway, have a good weekend. And to any members of our armed forces, I've seen now that police officers, fire brigades, doctors have now been getting involved in the IAMSOLDIERX campaign. Anyone who's unhappy, this can be a movement. If you're in the army, if you're serving our Queen and country, and you want to write your little message down on a bit of paper, and you want to hide your identity, then I'll make sure that it's publicised. I'll make sure that people hear your message, and hopefully the powers that be will see the huge uprising that is coming and realise that they have to change and have a complete rethink on how our people are treated. And I know that every member of the British public would want our armed services and our personnel to have every bit of support and everything they need. They haven't got it. So something has to change, something has to give. We want to try and bring that. So thank you. See you later.